This week we're talking about MRO supply chains. What are they and what makes them different? Coming right up. So if you work in MRO supply chains, you know they're different. But if you don't, maybe you don't quite understand the difference. That's what we're going to be talking about this week. And if there's enough interest in this, do like the video, do subscribe, do comment, because I can do a lot more videos around this topic of MRO. So what are we talking about? Generally, MRO means maintenance and repair and operations. Or some people say it's maintenance repair organisations. It's very different from most supply chains. If you think of like FMCG and retail and so on, it's all about selling a product, it's having availability of product, building products, you name it. It's all about the availability of products to sell. MROs don't sell anything, they issue materials. So let's think of a few examples. And we've been lucky enough here at Logistics Bureau to work with so many different MROs over the years. Let me think of some examples. Airline spares. But more often we're working with companies like miners, coal miners, iron ore miners, gold miners. Think about those for a minute. It's about huge capital equipment, haul trucks, drag lines for getting the coal out of the ground. And these things, you've got to keep them moving. They can't stop. So it's a very different focus. It's about having material of all different types, which I'll mention in a minute, to keep the operation going. So it is a very different focus in terms of inventory particularly. Utility companies, power generation, distribution, gas, water, all of those sort of companies, organisations are very much the same. And generally their focus, their KPIs are very different. It's about availability. I'm almost inclined to say at any cost. That might have been true 10 years ago. It's not now. Everybody's a lot more cost focused, but it almost has that sort of flavour to it. If you imagine a mining operation where you've got equipment digging whatever out of the ground, an open cut mine of some sort, you could be losing millions of dollars a day if that machinery stops. So the fact that you need to hold an extra $200,000 or $300,000 worth of materials in store just in case you need them, just in case you need this spare widget, this spare gearbox or whatever, almost doesn't matter, because the consequences of the operation stopping are huge. And so it has this very different focus on inventory, generally carrying a lot of inventory and a lot that hardly ever moves. So you might hear the term SLOBX, slow, obsolete and excess inventory. If you're used to working in MRO type businesses, organisations, there's a lot of that. I'm lucky enough to be working with one at the moment, and I can't share particular numbers, obviously, or tell you what industry they're in, but quite a large proportion of their inventory hasn't moved, let's say, in 5 years, which is not uncommon, because they've got these huge bits of equipment which need spare parts, which are hard to get, which are expensive, have got long lead times, maybe they come from overseas, and when you need one now to get the operation moving. And so there's that huge investment in this sort of equipment, in terms of spare parts. And you'll hear things like, when you're looking at MRO inventory, you'll hear things like consumables, which are getting used all the time. You've got spares, of course. You've got spares for planned maintenance. So in coal mining, they might be bringing the haul trucks out of operation periodically, giving them an overhaul, whatever they do, 100-hour overhaul or 200 hours or whatever. There's a maintenance kit that goes with that. Then they've got emergency spares. So when something breaks down, you've got to have those spares available. You've then got, in underground mining, sort of development of new areas of the mine, and then you've got materials for that development operation and the spare parts. You've got all kinds of things like rotables, often called repairables. So these are generally complete assemblies that once they're taken out of something that's being repaired, let's say you're replacing an engine, a gearbox, actuators of some sort, they then, because they're very expensive bits of equipment and they're repairable, they'll go back to a workshop or they'll go back to the supplier to be refurbished and put back into service. So those are generally called rotables, and there's a lot of those. So it's a very, very different kind of focus particularly on inventory. If you're new to supply chain and you're sort of very numerate and you like working with the numbers and inventory and forecasting and that type of stuff, that's a fascinating area to get into with MROs because it's so different and so critical. You know, to a degree, I mean, if you work in a supermarket chain, you'd say it's catastrophe if we run out of baked beans. Yeah, for a day you're going to lose some sales. You run out of something critical in a mine, you lose, you know, millions of dollars. You know, it's just leaking cash everywhere. So the consequences, I suppose, are very different. The other thing that's quite different in MRO operations is the behaviour of different groups. And what you find in these sorts of organisations is that people are very, very focused on uptime, if you like, or availability, and making sure that everything's operational. That's what they get measured on. You know, we don't want equipment that's not operational. These things are very often working 24/7. You know, they're measuring uptime on all different types of equipment, and people get jumped on from a great height if there's breakdowns and things are not fixed quickly. So it creates very interesting behaviours across different groups in the organisation. So, for example, you might have field service engineers in power distribution, you might have maintenance crews in mining, people who are fixing things, and they want the materials they need quickly. One of the challenges they very often have is that the people who look after those items, the warehouse people, are not always available. Sorry, I'm just glancing out the window because someone's picking apples off my tree. That's fine, go for it. The warehouse people are not always available. Maybe they're not working 24/7. Maybe they're only working 5 days a week. Maybe it's only open 10 hours a day. And so you have to come up with ways that the engineers can get access to the products. So very often they'll have access to the warehouse out of hours. That creates problems because they're not checking things out properly. They're in a rush, they want to get stuff fixed. Things don't get logged out properly, they don't get logged back in properly. What also happens is that they will over-order materials and they'll keep stuff. So regardless of the type of organisation, they might be maintenance people running around in vans, they might be, you know, running around a mine site, but they'll have what is very often termed squirrel stores. So they'll have their little stocks of spare parts, either in the back of the vehicle or somewhere. And all of that stuff is generally off-system, so it's invisible to the system, it's invisible to those who are managing the various materials, and that can create challenges and excess inventory. So that's another element where it's different. And then the whole planning focus tends to be different as well. So if you're an FMCG or something like that, you're planning sales, you're planning the introduction of new products, the phasing out of older products. You've probably got some seasonality that you can work on. With MROs, it's a little bit different. You might have things like planned shutdowns. I haven't worked in steel for a while, but I can remember and concrete's the same. If you're making concrete, you're making steel, you know, you've got these huge smelters. You've got to keep those running 24/7, and then periodically they shut them down. Could be for a number of weeks. It all gets maintained and cleaned and fixed, and then it's up and running again. Same thing in sort of power generation. So you can plan those ahead, and then there's a huge build-up of spare parts and rotables and so on to fix whatever it is during that planned shutdown, and then the stuff's brought back online and away we go again. So you've got those sorts of materials and spares. You've obviously got the maintenance, the routine maintenance stuff, and then you've got the breakdown stuff as well. So if you're into inventory, that's a fantastic area to get into, working with MROs on the inventory management, the procurement, and it's a very, very different type of focus to many other supply chains. So if your interest is in MRO, if you work in MRO, if you have a particular issue, do comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We've actually got, over the years, we've built up a matrix of things that MROs need to focus on to get really good at managing their inventory, and we call it the 20 stages of excellence. There are 20 things, and if there's enough interest, I might explore that, and we might do 3 or 4 each week and talk about some of the challenges and how to overcome those and help you manage your MRO inventory. So if that's of interest, Do comment down below as well. If no one's interested, I'll talk about something else. But hopefully MRO is of interest to you. It is to me. It's a fascinating area of supply chain management. So thank you for watching, and bye for now.